Hello, everyone. Well, I see people now. Hi. I've got a special thing today because we've got a special guest who's going to be joining me. And I'm just going to see if he's on here now. No, not yet. His name is Robert Breedlove. And hopefully he'll get with us in a second. But I'm really excited about this discussion because I found someone. I actually met Robert quite some time ago. One of the people that worked in my company at the front desk was dating him, and I bumped into him. And it was kind of the first conversation I had about crypto, which was kind of fascinating for me. But I'm excited to have him, and hopefully he'll just be joining us in a second. But while I'm waiting for him, I'll just say that I just had a very interesting breakfast meeting at my former business partner, Glenn Stearns' home. Now, you may know Glenn. Glenn is the founder of Stearns Lending, which became a huge mortgage lender. And we were very, very close friends for a long time. And then we kind of had a bit of a falling out, which was difficult for me because when I went through all my big challenges in 2016, that was kind of part of it for me. But I went to his home today and kind of listened to his story, which was a fascinating story. And I learned so much from it. So we've got other people requesting to join, except not Robert Breedlove. So hold on one second. Let me see if I can get my assistant to see if I can catch him. Can you find Eden for me?
Find Eden?
Yeah, tell her to call Robert. Okay, maybe he's on now. Nope, not yet. Everyone else is requesting to join except for the person who's supposed to join. So anyway, I was on this morning. I was talking about this breakfast I had with Glenn Stearns, which was kind of coming full circle for me, I have to say, because Glenn and I had been very close. We'd been everywhere together. We've been to Africa on safari together. We'd done all kinds of stuff together many times and all over the world. And we almost died together several times. But then when I started my company, I was the senior partner in it. And Glenn was, he was a partner, but not in the senior position. And so he kind of disagreed with me because I said no to a deal with KKR because I felt like KKR was a big private equity fund. And one thing I know about private equity, having worked for Warburg Pincus, is that everyone calls them PE as an acronym, but actually they should be called PF for professional fuckers. And the reason why I say that is because I've seen them destroy so many companies because it just made sense to them financially. I mean, literally, there's no calculus there except for just pure money. And so entrepreneurs usually start companies because they want to create something cool, not because they're, wanting to, sort of just make money. I started companies because I wanted to create something that would be different for the world. I've started many companies. I've founded 11 companies now. And, I feel like things are coming full circle. It's been 11 years since I founded the companies. And I'm about to do a buyout offer on all of our shareholders, which is also kind of a big coming full circle for me personally. And then also, I just got, this recognition for leadership from the university at Cal State Fullerton. And that's going to be presented to me on May 12th. So I'm kind of having this big reflection stuff. Well, Glenn ended up selling his company to Blackstone. And Blackstone, as they do, they basically ended up bankrupting his company that had his name on it. It was a terribly sad story. I've now invited Glenn to be on a podcast with me because I'd like to see this. I'd like you guys to see this as well, to hear the story. Glenn, since, he's not doing poorly. I mean, he's one of the wealthiest guys that I know. We were in his home movie theater, which looked like a regular movie theater, except much nicer. And, you know, a lot of people wouldn't feel sorry for him because he's very, very successful. He's also done this show, Undercover Billionaire, which has been very, very successful for him also. But he just loves what he does. But we had this disagreement, and it was really interesting to hear him come to the same conclusions that I came to very early on, but could not convince him of early on for his own company. I ended up buying him out of his position. He still has some small amount in my company, but I miss him as a friend, and I feel badly that it ended up having to go that direction. And he got cancer in the meantime and everything, which is very difficult for him and also for me. But I look back on all of this now, and I realize that we're really here just to learn how to love and forgive. That's really the purpose of life. It's not about other things. It really is for us to go through this cycling like a school, where we have trials, tribulations, difficulties, major challenges, and through those major challenges and difficulties, we actually can find ourselves. And once we find ourselves in that process, then your whole world starts to shift, because the world, you realize, is no longer against you. It's actually all been happening for you, even the difficult situations. And so, you're kind of catching me today in a very reflective, self-reflective moment in time where I'm really, kind of realizing how much of a school this matrix, or what I call creatrix, really is. And, while we're waiting here for Robert, hopefully he isn't messed up on his calendar, but I would be happy to take any questions about anything. And you're getting me on a day where I'm actually wearing, I'm really dressed because I've got another meeting this afternoon that's important. But I would love to take any questions you might have about life and career and business. And because as I'm kind of reading through all these comments, which are from all over the world, obviously, it's been a while since I've done a live. But I'd be happy to answer questions about business or life, and also about esotericism and what's happening in Egypt. There's also some major announcements that we're going to be making related to Egypt. I went to meet with Billy Carson, and Billy and I, with Dr. B, did a podcast that's going to be airing soon on some of the new announcements and new discoveries we made in Egypt, which I believe now we know what the purpose of the pyramids was. And I don't think that it's an energy device. I believe that it's teaching us within this, it's a spiritual matrix that's teaching us the major aspects and the foundational basis of light, matter, sound, gravity, everything. Because what we found is that the pyramids themselves, in their proportions, and I just presented this at the Portal to Ascension conference in San Diego last weekend, but what we found was that each of the pyramids, proportional dimensions, so the height versus the base, or 1/2 the base, of Menkaure, the smallest pyramid, is 5/4. That makes a perfect, in Pythagorean triangle language, that would give us a perfect 51.34019 degrees as its slope angle, and that is the correct slope angle of Menkaure pyramid. We also found that Khafre pyramid, of course, is a 3-4-5 triangle, which is 53.1301 degrees. And then the Great Pyramid is 51.85397 degrees. And we know this now perfectly because we've been able to derive it from the exact squaring of the circle. So when you have a perfect squaring of the circle where the perimeter is equal to the circumference and the square is equivalent to the half base of the Great Pyramid, then you have a circle that is perfectly squared and perfectly circled by taking the height of the Great Pyramid and making a circle of its diameter as the height of the pyramid. And then you've got a perfect matching of squaring of the circle. So what does that actually mean? Well, Menkaure is 5/4, which is the major third in music. Khafre pyramid is 4/3, which is the perfect fifth. But embedded within both of those, within the major third, its inverse is the minor sixth. And within the Khafre pyramid, its inverse, of course, as well, is basically pointing us to the perfect fifth, so 3/2 relationship. And not only that, but we also have all the other musical intervals that can show up in these two pyramids, as well as the ones that are missing can be found inside of the Great Pyramid. So the Great Pyramid's proportional references are the diminished fifth and the augmented fourth, as well as the minor second. So 25/24. All of these exact proportional ratios are pointing to a musical spectrum. And this musical spectrum is perfect. It's mind-boggling. I was presenting this, and Robert Schoch was there, and J.J. Hurtak was there. And J.J. and Robert came to me afterwards and basically said, yeah, you nailed it on the musical relationship of the pyramids. And I fully, we know that this is correct. It's unequivocal. There are 13 musical intervals. And, I've done a lot of work on musical intervals because of my work in precise temperament tuning. And so what the pyramids are really telling us is the full spectrum of light and the full spectrum of sound. And when you realize that even the emotions that we feel are tied and can be induced by certain intervals in music, which are actually just mathematically derived, then you realize when we look at the pyramids and we see it one direction, so we see 5/4 for Menkaure, actually what we're seeing there is also the minor sixth. And the major chord or the major third gives us feelings of love and joy and fulfillment, whereas, and even romantic love, whereas the minor sixth, its inverse, which is embedded in the proportions too, is just a function difference of time. So we could go from C to E, middle C to E note, so that would be da, da, and then da, da. So that would be one octave up. Da, and then da, 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 da. So basically when we look at this, just by inversing this and changing the order of it from a time perspective, it's literally just time. By changing the order and inversing these intervals, we have completely the opposite emotion. So the reported emotion that people feel on a minor sixth is heartbreak. So this means that in the experience of love, we also have the seed of heartbreak embedded right within it. The seed of heartbreak. So it's almost just a time function. You feel love, you will also feel heartbreak. The two must go together. They are hand in hand. So when we look at the pyramids on the plateau, we are seeing the major chords and their minor equivalents. And to me, it says something about the transcendence of the duality of the nature of life. And to me, that is beautiful in and of itself. So, looks like a ton of comments on here. Wow. So basically, what does this all mean? It means that it's all in our perspective. Even the fact that I felt betrayed by my former friend, right, who hopefully I will be friends with again, I should be grateful to him because the experience that he gave me of this betrayal was one where I could find myself. He played a valuable role in it. I asked someone recently, like, okay, what do you think you were here to learn? What do you think you came to Earth to learn? And they said to me a very interesting answer. They said, I feel like I'm here to learn forgiveness. So I said, okay, if you're here to learn forgiveness, then what would you need to be able to learn forgiveness? And they say, I need people to forgive. So what if you have people on the other side before coming here who actually make promises to betray you so that you would need to forgive them? And so that through that forgiveness process, you could learn who you actually are. It changes the context of literally everything. And I think that is the real reason why we are here, to learn this transcendence, to break out of how we view things in only one way, and start to realize that everything is happening for us, not happening to us. And that is in and of itself a beautiful thing. Hey, Andre, I see you on here. Great to see you. So the pyramid plateau not only from the side can we see the pyramids are these exact mathematical ratios. Let me see here. Okay, not only from the side, let me see if I can invite him in here. Hold on one second. There for us to understand this perspective so that when we look at it, we could see these musical intervals, and sound and light are the same thing. One is just the absorption of the other. So these experiences that we have through time are basically telling us to look at the world in a more transcendent way, to rise above it. We also realized that on this last trip that Metatron, as well as Thoth, was showing up, everywhere, which was fascinating. We found Staff of Hermes all over the walls of the pyramids for the first time, especially in Menkaure Pyramid. And we found what looks to be something related to a Noah's Ark scene inside of Khafre Pyramid in the King's Chamber. We've not released these photographs yet. Some of them we have. You may have seen the photograph that I posted about the man that's on the wall of the Queen's Chamber that I think most people could see. And I believe these walls were heavily scrubbed with abrasives and everything to get graffiti off the walls, but none of these glyphs, petroglyphs, look at all like they are graffiti in any way, shape, or form. I have no reason to believe they're made by anyone other than being original to the structure. I believe the same is true as well for the Alpha Omega. We've now found and identified and proven there are 37 sarcophagi in Egypt, even in the Valley of the Kings, that have Alpha Chi Omega on them, and they're in a light etch. We literally found them everywhere. And it was great on the trip. I was able to teach people how to be able to see these things quickly. And a lot of them were already studying a lot of geometry. Geometry is a solution for you because as you raise your consciousness, you can start to see more and more perspectives. The more perspectives you can see, the more quickly you can identify patterns. And that's one of the key aspects to life, particularly in this game. And so basically, we found Metatron related stuff everywhere, and even squaring of the circle, just by drawing Metatron's cube and then connecting two intersections on Metatron's cube, you can derive exactly the slope angle of the Great Pyramid, and which then also derives this key of Metatron. And the key of Metatron really is a circle and a rod. And you would have seen circle and a rod in ancient Sumerian texts, on the cuneiform tablets, etc., that have been around for a long time that also depict Anunnaki, etc. So Shamash is holding this same rod and the circle, and they have the same length. So this rod is basically the same length as the circumference of the circle. And that is a key in and of itself. That is the key. Because once you have that, then you have mastered squaring the circle. Once you know how to do that, and you can do that very quickly through Metatron's cube. Anyone can. That's one of the nice things about this. So, but not only is it something that we've been able to identify by standing on the ground and then looking and comparing the pyramids to each other, and proportionally you can find all of that just through Metatron's cube. But in addition to this, we also found that from the aerial view, we know exactly why the pyramids are where they are. They match the Orion's belt, but all of it can be derived as well using Metatron's cube. So not only at the x-axis, but also at the y-axis, we can now derive exactly what's happening on the ground and imply a z-axis as well. The z-axis is implied through the inversion of these mathematical ratio intervals that induce emotional states in humanity. And we could say that maybe our experience with time is really just the collection of all of our emotional states through time, because that's how we perceive the world. Now, I believe that the key aspect to the world is that we find ourselves and we find our own uniqueness, and that uniqueness, once you find it, is the song that you're meant to play for the world. And we're born into this world, and we immediately start thinking, I'm separate from my mother, I'm separate from other people around me. And so you immediately want to fit in. And that's the way the world is. It sort of structures everything so that you want to fit in with the world around you. So you do things, you go into careers, you decide what art you want to be into based on your peers and your friends, etc. But actually, the true value of life is to realize that exactly who you are in your purest authentic form is what you're always meant to be. That you are precisely what you've been looking for. And I'm now just starting to fully grasp this, that each of us provides an opportunity for the universe to observe itself through our unique eyes, because we all have our way of seeing the world, and our way of seeing the world is never replicated by anyone or anything else. So let's imagine that we're actually feeding this gigantic database of emotional states, that we're feeding into an Akashic record all of our perspectives, that the universe uses our perspectives to expand itself, because by expanding its perspectives, it also expands. In order for the universe to continue to expand, and it expands at purportedly the speed of light, I like to think of that more as the speed of perception, and you may have seen my video on that, then it's like fulfilling itself through our eyes. And as each one of us ascend, it also becomes more ascendant. And the whole purpose of life is not to be like anybody else. It's to be exactly who you are, and no one different than that. It's for you to embrace exactly who you are. So I'm very excited about this. You know, in the last few weeks, it's been very humbling for me to see things that I've been working on for years come to fruition in such beautiful ways. You know, I met with one of the largest organizations in the world this week that literally created payment systems for the entire globe. And to talk with them about, you know, cryptography and such, and stuff that I had worked on and discovered was also very fulfilling for me. But probably even more than that, the advances that have now been made by other people around the world to see how precise temperament tuning could actually have a huge impact on the world and our own self-actualization and self-transcendence. So I'm just feeling a lot of gratitude today. I see there were some questions back here that I want to basically touch on. Okay. Where's the opportunity I could draw sacred geometry? Okay, well, first of all, buy a compass and a straight edge. You can go on to my website. There are 3 courses on there. One of them is focused only on geometry. There's actually 4 courses. One of them is called Philosophical Geometry. It's entirely free. There are 30 hours of it on my website that you can find. In addition, there's a beginner's class that you can actually pay for as well. And that class is on my website. It's called Meditative Geometry. It teaches you geometry as a meditative and consciousness expansion process. It is a practice. Let's see here. Well, it looks like we don't have Robert for some reason. He must have gotten the schedule mixed up or something, and I probably should have texted him beforehand. We are part of something that we can't, okay, but we can feel. We're part of something that we know is there, but we can feel it, but we don't know exactly what it is. Okay, Robert for president. No, thank you. No, you know, I'll tell you a funny story about that. I was actually asked by the Republican Party, and I'm not Republican, but because in California, no Republicans could ever win because it's so heavily Democrat here on the what we call the left coast. And I'm not a Democrat or Republican. I'm an independent. But I was asked to consider running for U.S. Senate. And this was when, you know, Feinstein and Boxer were the 2 senators in California. Because I speak several languages, they thought, okay, you know, he's as good a candidate as any. And I decided that I wasn't going to run because I saw how the political system worked. I got involved in several campaigns. I was on Meg Whitman's team. I thought she was a moderate Republican as well, very moderate, so I could at least listen and see what she was doing. And I saw the party kind of chew her up in a way, and it was very unfortunate. So I decided not to run. And I remember going to the ballot box and wondering, well, I wonder who ended up running for this, and realized that nobody ran against Kamala Harris. So Kamala Harris, so my friends that know this story, you know, basically they kind of blame me somehow for Kamala Harris becoming vice president. I don't know that I could take the blame for that, but certainly she didn't have any opponent in California who ran against her, and that's the one that they'd asked me to run in. Okay, I saw some question in here, way up here, that was about 432 hertz tuning. Let's see if I can find it here. I really wish there was a way to do this. Okay, Enoch became Metatron, and Metatron has evolved into something greater. Yeah, I feel more and more the resonance of that, and you know, as I get closer and closer to understanding this, I feel it ever more powerfully. So that's been also another major kind of revelation. Metatron has been heavily guiding me at this time, me as well. Irregular homogeneous construct, earthquake proves, don't know what that means. Okay. Love Philomath, great expansions through the geometrical expressions. Thank you. If you haven't read Philomath yet, I highly recommend it. People really have liked and enjoyed the book. The latest book, Polymath, also a fantastic thing to get into because it's really more focused on the impossible problems of geometry that are meant to be impossible, but actually are entirely possible. And that's the whole thing. You know, I just heard this analogy this morning, which I think is fascinating. Let's assume we're in a school, right? And the school of life is here to teach us this expansion of spirituality. And you would create a system that's not going to be easy to just overcome. And you would put a memory block on everyone too, to make the game feel even more real, right? Well, you know, people ask all the time, well, if this is a game by some higher power, then why in the heck are we subjecting ourselves to it? And why would we subject ourselves to it? And the person gave this analogy of fleas. So if you catch fleas and put them in a jar, then fleas can jump really high. They can jump super high, and they can jump out of a jar. But if you put a lid on the jar and the flea jumps up and hits the jar at the top, they'll do that a few times, and then they won't do it anymore. After 3 days, if you take off the lid, I've not done this. This is not something that I've actually tested myself. I don't even know how I'd go about catching all these fleas. No, thank you. But apparently, if you take the fleas and you put them in the jar, and after 3 days, take the lid off, all the fleas will stop jumping. They won't even try. They won't even try to jump out of the jar. What's more, if they have children, the fleas that are born to those fleas that learned this, even though they have the ability to jump out of the jar, they just lost the ability to jump out of the jar because they don't believe they can anymore. And their children will be born without the ability to jump. So that makes me really wonder, okay, is humanity in the same type situation? Do we have far more abilities and powers than what we know? Does this explain things like extrasensory perception, or people that have telekinesis, or other abilities that we just have come to believe societally no longer exist, or maybe never existed? We read about this stuff in, you know, ancient texts. We read about people living much, much longer lives. Have we started to live shorter lives simply because, like the fleas, we didn't know it could be otherwise? It's provocative. And, you know, it's like, how do you boil a frog? Well, you don't throw them into boiling water. You throw them into lukewarm water and then have them sit inside that thing and then just turn up the heat slowly. He'll never jump out because he can't even recognize the increasing temperature of the water. If you shock him with it immediately, he does recognize it. And so this is the old adage of, you know, how do you boil a frog? And maybe we've sort of built into this construct of this game, this notionality of it being difficult to remember and to wake up until you're meant to, right? It's kind of like that show, The Truman Show, which I remember seeing in the 90s. And that kind of freaked me out because I remember thinking, wait a minute, is that what life is really all about? Is that a thing, right? And I hate to say it, guys, but I think it is. I don't think we're in a studio somewhere with a dome. We might be laying in some vat of jello somewhere on some other planet playing this game, in, you know, what we think of as just a few minutes, like an inception, where you have a dream within a dream within a dream, and then you can expand your entire life experience through multiple lifetimes. Who knows? I also believe our construct of time, what we believe it to be, is entirely wrong. You know, time is a torus, and yesterday I posted that the torus is defined by a right triangle, and the right triangle is defined, we now know because we discovered it, defined by prime factorization. And that means that factorization can be broken down into three aspects, which are the sum, the product, and the difference. And every triangle has this relationship. You know, the hypotenuse is x plus y divided by 2. And x and y are the two parents, mother and father. And then the height is x times y taken to the power of 1/2. And the base is y minus x times 1/2 as well. So this relationship of geometric mean, which is the height, the arithmetic mean, and a differential mean at the base is something that we discovered. And we wrote a paper on called the sum product conjecture. Well, I believe this defines not only gravity and energy and mass and matter, because this is the foundational basis of the inverse square law. It's exactly tied into this. And rest mass energy and total mass energy and momentum and kinetic force can be tied into the exact proportions of a right triangle as well. So therefore, time is derived from a torus that is constructed from the sum and the product and the difference of two integers. To me, that's a profound thing. And it speaks to, there's probably only one force in the universe, and it's probably that force of mother, father, X and Y, that creates electricity, gravity, magnetism, and time, and mass, and matter. So all of this is kind of exciting to be on the precipice of right now. And anyone who's into sacred geometry or into geometry knows that this thing is full, like literally full of patterns. And unless you actually dive into it, you'll never be able to see and experience it. And I can tell you, for those of you that do and take that trek, it will be way worth your time. It'll be worth your effort. You will get a connection to the divine in ways that you never thought possible. The universe will start speaking to you every single day. And the number of synchronicities you experience, whether it be license plate numbers or timestamps or people coming to you talking about something. Yesterday, I said to somebody that you know, time is a torus, and they said it's a bull, and I said, well, yeah, maybe. I said it's a torus spelled with an O, T-O-R-U-S, not T-A-U-R-U-S. And then I went on to social media, and there was a photograph that somebody had just posted that I follow of a bull with a torus field inside of its horns. And I'm kind of like, okay, here we go. Another bizarre universal coincidence. Well, I don't believe in coincidences anymore. Let's let the coincidences thing just go, because there are no coincidences and everything is pattern. It's just we are limited by dimension from seeing those patterns, and it's up to us to raise our consciousness so that we can be able to perceive more and more patterns in the world around us. And those patterns are not just in the natural order of things. It's not just in natural sciences. I'm talking about the patterns of your life, your experiences, your own negative self-narratives, the things that you don't like about yourself, that you continue to harbor all the time. Those are the things that keep us in these continuous loops where we feel like we have to keep coming back to school, right? And we will continue to experience it until we stop judging it and learn to fall in love with it. I was waiting for this guy named Robert Breedlove, who is very, very passionate about free speech and very passionate about you know, what's happening right now with government and everything else. Okay, is polymath or philomath also for people that do not study mathematics? Yes. So the way we've all learned mathematics, I think, sucks. Just saying it. We haven't learned it because mathematics hasn't been taught to us with meaning. As soon as it's taught with meaning, all of a sudden people fall in love with mathematics. It's like a light switch goes off. And it's amazing because I get so many text messages, so many emails from people every day that say, oh my gosh, I've changed entirely my perspective on mathematics. And yes, Polymath is not yet available in Spanish, but Philomath is. Philomath is available on Amazon in Spanish. Just go to Amazon.com, not your local one if you're not in a country outside the United States. Just go onto Amazon.com in the US, and they will ship it to you anywhere in the world. And they do it pretty easily and with pretty good results too. I have to say I've been pretty happy with this. Let's see, any compass suggestions? Okay, so the compasses that I use are Alvin. Let's see if I might even have one here. Yep. So compass, I tend to use Alvin. I have a compass everywhere. I think I have a compass everywhere that's within, like, you know, I can like touch. It's kind of funny. But I am actually designing right now my own line of compasses that are going to be made of wood and metal with calipers, like my own set, because I've not been able to find a set that I really fell in love with and that is, you know, perfect, both functionally and from a form perspective. So I'm excited about this because it's going to be coming out probably next year, a line of compasses and straight edges and phi calipers and other stuff that go along with that, all the best erasers and pencils and everything in it, because I get requests for this stuff all the time. And no, it will not be free. How to be free? How to be free from the matrix? Fall in love with it. Fall in love with it. That's how to be free from the matrix. But no, I can't. Nothing's free. And not even freedom is free, guys. Truth. So if you're looking for things to be free, that's not the construct of the world that we signed up for. And, you know, it's interesting because we all tend to think that because we see the world not as it is, but as we are, we all tend to judge how other people make decisions on why would somebody want to come into this learning experience to suffer? Wouldn't they want it easy? Well, if they're here in a learning experience and they know that this is actually the most important experience they could have, they're not going to want it to be easy. You know, it's like going to college and spending all kinds of money to go to college and then just cheating and having someone else take all your tests and do all your stuff. You're only cheating yourself. I remember when I was in high school, my friends would spend so much effort trying to cheat on tests. Like, it was unbelievable. They would do more work trying to cheat the test than to actually just study for the test and do well on the test. And I couldn't believe it. And I think that happens a lot here in this game as well. We all probably have seen that and experienced that through time. But, you know, that's definitely, let's see, we have a question about Arcturus. What would you like to know about Arcturus from Madison? I'm happy to talk about it. Okay. Okay. It is all illusions. Yes, I agree. We're in a very, very intricate illusion that is really just us with our own energetic light signature and number. And then 1 over that number is our life experience. And it creates a repetition cycle of pattern, right? And that pattern repeats over and over and over again. And it's interesting because just as I was saying that, we had 316 people on this. 316, for those of you that know, I was just talking about x and 1 over x. Well, x times 1 over x equals 1, and the square root of 10 is 3.16. And the square root of -1, I believe, can also be derived as a real value as 3.16, right? The square root of 10 multiplied by 1 over the square root of 10, which then takes on a negative polarity shift. And then when you multiply those two numbers together, they come out to -1. So 3.162277766 times 0.316 or -0.316227766 equals -1. Now, from that, we can also derive that e to the I pi plus 1 doesn't actually only equal 0. When we use that value for the I value, it turns out it equals 1.37036, which is the fine structure constant. Pretty interesting. Okay, look into your Saturn return, guys. Find out where Saturn is in your chart. The sign, your 28-year Saturn return is will teach you. Yes, I know lots of people that are going through this right now. I know lots of people that have gone through it. I went through it as well. There's something real to this. So definitely the mathematics of astrology is pretty astounding, and numerology as well. So there are clues hidden in this game all over the place, and it feels like it's supposed to be like an escape room. But the only problem is the only way you can escape this escape room is by falling in love with it. And that is the ultimate mindfuck, right? Because it's like you're in this game, and I've done several escape rooms. I love them. They're very, very fun. Let's see, we've got here, 1117 occurs in my life for the last 3 years. Well, you may be surprised to know that today is the 117th day of the year. So funny that you probably didn't even know that, which also is one of the pyramid days, because 11 is the base of the pyramid proportionally to its height of 7. Okay, where can we start with expanding our perspective on math? First of all, you have to realize that there's a hidden order and a hidden structure within math. And I'll just take you through this a little bit. So the Fibonacci number series starts with 0 and then 1, and then 1 plus 1 equals 2, and then 1 plus 2 equals 3. So it just keeps expanding on itself by adding the last 2 integers of the series. And then it goes, so 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144. And then when you divide the last number by the next number, it comes out to, 0.618, and its inverse is 1.618. And what makes this magical is that those 2 numbers have the same 0.618033987 taken in their inverse as well. It's just missing the 1 in the front. And that is kind of very unique for the golden ratio. It's the only number that does this, or so we thought. And now we found that all numbers can do this. But it takes a little explanation to tell you how all numbers can actually find their golden ratio. But what you'll notice is that there's a pattern. And the pattern is that every 24 numbers, the Fibonacci cycle repeats itself. So and the way you'd identify this is to realize there's another hidden language within mathematics, which is you reduce every number in the Fibonacci series down to 1 digit. So the number 13, which is a Fibonacci number, is 4, because 1 plus 3 equals 4. This is the same stuff that's used in numerology. But this is also what number theorists use to find and identify patterns. I wish I'd known this when I was in high school and I was taking, tests and stuff like that. I would have gotten even better scores, because you can use this in every way, conceivable to help you to be faster at performing mathematical tricks. So let's say you're asked to do a long form, multiple choice question of what is this number multiplied by another number, right? Well, all you would have to do is find the digital root of each of those numbers. So reduce it down to 1 digit, and then multiply those 2 digits together, and then reduce their result down to 1 number, and then pick the multiple choice answer that has the same digital root answer. It's much faster than doing a very long form, equation of multiplication or division or square roots or anything. You can basically use this in so many different ways. It's kind of mind-boggling. But when you notice that the Fibonacci series goes, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 then becomes 4, 21 becomes 3, 34 becomes 7, 55 becomes 1, because 5 plus 5 equals 10, and that's 1 again. And then 89 becomes 8. Then you'll notice that at a circle of 24 positions around it, which is the cuboctahedral structure, which is this right here, this structure, it's cuboctahedron. It creates a 24 edge cycle that if we crush this down and make it flat, it makes a mod 24. So why is this important? Well, because Fibonacci numbers repeat every 24 numbers. So those single digit analyses will do 2 things. Number one, it'll repeat every 24 numbers. The same numbers will repeat itself infinitely every 24 numbers, just by doing digital root, this numerology approach to math. And then the second thing it will do is that 180-degree opposites on this 24-hour clock, you end up with the number 9 is always the sum. So if there's a 1 at 1 o'clock, then at 13 o'clock on this 24-hour clock, you're going to have the number 8. So 1 and then 8, and then it's 1 again, and then it becomes 8 again. And then 2 means that the next one is going to be at 7. So 2 will be a complement of 7. And this is the same as musical notes. right? I was just talking about the major third, which is the 5/4 relationship, and its inverse is the minor sixth. Well, it's something you can learn in music really easily is just to take the inverse of a number will automatically give you the complement that adds up to 9. So if you've got a major third, the polarity is positive. Its inverse will be a negative polarity, turning it into a minor chord, and it will be 9 minus the original number. So 9 minus a third, or 3, equals 6. So then it becomes major third becomes minor sixth. So a minor second has to then become a major seventh, right? And it's like this across the board. Where it breaks is you no longer have a shift in polarity for the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth. They're both the same polarity. And this is why Caffrey pyramid is built on that, mathematics. So now when you realize that everything sums to 9, you realize there's a pattern at 24 on everything. Also, all prime numbers larger than 3 will square to a multiple of 24 plus 1, without exception. And we prove this in a paper. So 5 times 5 is 25. That's 1 times 24 plus 1. 7 times 7, the next prime number is 49. That's 2 times 24 plus 1. 11 times 11 is 121, and that's 5 times 24 plus 1. And then 7 times 24 plus 1 is 169, which is 13 times 13. You know, you could go through all of the numbers all the way up. You know, 17 times 17 is 289. Again, it's a multiple of 24 plus 1. There's never a break to this, infinitely. So there's an inherent pattern of musicality and sine-cosine relationships in mod 24. Without a doubt, it's unequivocal. It's unequivocal. And this is why Nikola Tesla did so much of his work based on mod 24. This is why his dynamo system for electricity was based on a mod 24 configuration. This is also why Ramanujan, arguably one of the greatest mathematicians of all time, who had no formal training but was recognized by Cambridge University as being second only possibly to Isaac Newton in his prowess in mathematics. All of his work was also based on 24. And it's also why the square root of 10 divided by 10 plus 1, parentheses to the power of 1 over 0.24 equals pi. 24 is a very, very profound number. The 24th letter of the alphabet is X. And if you've been noticing, everything these days is about X. Even gender now is referred to as X, right? We have an X bathroom now, right? Where it's like, you don't have to be male or female. So it's in between. It's the middle way. So when we start looking at this pattern of 24-ness, then we can start realizing, well, maybe it actually pertains as well to mod 60. And my colleague and one of the guys on our research team, I first met him when he sent me this mod 60 analysis of Fibonacci numbers. And his name is Will Wire, and he does all my artwork. He's a brilliant artist as well. And Will sent me the last few days a pattern that he'd identified of Fibonacci numbers at mod 60 as well. Only this time, instead of summing to 9, which holds a placeholder as 0, because there's no 0 in this digital root or mod 9 analysis. And so when he sent me the pattern on mod 60, I was fascinated because I then realized that the 180-degree opposite numbers on the mod 60 positions sum to 1. So now we've got a binary code in Fibonacci numbers that 1 is a placeholder using mod 9 on top of mod 24. And the other is still based on mod 9 on top of mod 60. And of course, 24 is a unique number because it sums and its digital root is 6 also. So is this why we have 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes, and 60 seconds? That comes out to 86,400. And then if we put 1 on the end of that, on the front end of it, you've got the speed of light, 1.864 times 10 to the 5th power miles per second. Or you've also got the diameter of the sun, 864,000 miles. So when we start realizing these patterns are virtually everywhere and that there's no coincidences here, this starts opening up an entirely new relationship with mathematics for us, because we start realizing the universe has been trying to speak to us for a really long time. And that universe is really just your subconscious mind. You connecting the left and right hemispheres of your brain into a superconscious mind. Maybe we're all geniuses, like Walter Russell said. genius is self-bestowed, but mediocrity is self-inflicted. And maybe he would be referring to the fleas that can't jump out of the glass jar as being the mediocre fleas that chose their own mediocrity, when they've had the ability to jump out of the jar all along. It's just changing the way we see the world that makes everything shift for us. And that allows us to experience the world in very different ways, because then we can be the change that we want to see in the world. And if you want to see the world change, change how you see the world. When you change how you see things, the things you see change. I'll repeat that. When you change how you see things, the things you see change. A few years ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to go. I was so upset at Glenn. But now I'm grateful because I have the benefit of hindsight. And how many of you have had experiences that you suffered through, you went through difficulty, it was so hard, you didn't think you might even make it. And then a few months later, or sometimes years later, you look back and when describing the event to others, you say, you know, in retrospect, that was actually the best thing that ever could have happened to me, because it led to this, this, and this. And that became the beauty of the world. And yes, it is the you inverse. The you inverse is still you. It's just your divided self. And when we realize how beautiful this actually is, then we can operate very differently in the world, and the world shifts. When you start loving the world, it starts loving you back. One of my favorite songs by Michael Jackson back in the day. Oh, there you are, Robert. I see you. Can I add you in? Robert, let's see. I see you now. I can accept you. There we go. So I accepted. Let's see.
Hey.
It should be on. Hey.
Sorry, I've been trying to.
Well, I had a long preamble, but
trying to
great
get
to
on
have.
for like 30 minutes, but.
Oh, you have. I'm sorry.
Good to
see you. Good to see you and meet you again. I know we met once in A's in Newport Beach, but you were there with Janet that night, and you were one of the first people that started talking to me about cryptocurrency and about Bitcoin. And I remember thinking, oh, that's fascinating, because you seem kind of like a hedge fund kind of a guy, and or you had some history, it seemed, from Wall Street type of thing. And to hear you talk about, you know, cryptocurrency in that way, and Bitcoin in particular, was fascinating to me. So you definitely had an indelible impact, and you were memorable. So, and then when I started getting into blockchain, as you know, I've several companies, but now I'm involved in the blockchain space and in cryptography in particular from a mathematics perspective. I thought I would reach out to you. So thanks for taking the time. And I really, really like your posts, especially you're kind of a rebel. You kind of have a rebellious side, which I tend to vibe with a lot. And so tell me a little bit about your history and how you got to this way of thinking.
Your intuition's correct. I was actually running a hedge fund when we first met. And my background is traditional finance and accounting. Mostly I was a career CFO, but also operated a hedge fund for a few years. And I was fortunate enough to have read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, in 2004, 2005. This book is about the inception of the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the United States. It also goes deeper into the history of money. So does like an ontological look at money, the nature of money. You know, I think there's a chapter actually titled "What is Money?" So it gets into like the nuts and bolts of what it is, where it comes from, how it works. And my takeaway at that time, I was probably just under 20 years old when I read it, was that the entire monetary system was corrupted and broken, and that central banking was essentially this, I really think it's a malevolent institution that dominates and controls the world, because the money that is, when money is monopolized and controlled and one group can print it and others cannot, as in all the citizens, the group that can print it is able to steal from those who cannot print it through inflation. So
yeah,
I mean, it's my strong opinion that most of the problems we see in the world today, culturally, financially, geopolitically, are an emergent property of this corrupt money. And that's why I'm a huge advocate for Bitcoin, Bitcoin only, Bitcoin specifically. Actually, I think all cryptocurrency is a scam. I think that term will go away in due time. I don't think the term blockchain will persist either. I think the only use case for a blockchain is decentralized non-state digital cash, which is Bitcoin. And I think Bitcoin is the answer and hopefully the disruptor to this malevolent institution we call the central bank. So I am passionate about it. I'm passionate because I don't know. I guess I've always had human freedom on my heart my entire life. And there's that old quote from Henry Ford that's pretty popular. He said, if people understood the banking and monetary system, he believed there would be a revolution before the morning. And it's really that. It's just this thing is hidden in plain sight. It's the biggest scam in human history. Yet somehow it's been so successful that the US dollar is simultaneously the most desired asset in history. So, it's my mission to just try and help people see the light and look behind the curtain and hopefully decorrupt the world in the process.
What's interesting is that I spent 2 weeks on Fiji once.
I do.
And you like Fiji water? Fiji water is pretty good water, right? And so I met the guy who got control of Fiji water. And he was like this white guy who gets control. I'll save his name because I don't want to speak ill of someone necessarily. But basically, he was kind of very proud of himself for having gotten control of the Fiji water. And I remember it really made me think, because water is the most abundant resource on planet Earth. I mean, we call ourselves the blue dot when you look at us from outer space. And yet, given that it's the most abundant resource, and by the way, I've been on aircraft carriers where they make their own water. They literally make their own water. And 50 million gallons a day is made out of ocean water through desalinization on an aircraft carrier. 50 million gallons per day. And so I keep thinking, it's like, what did we do? Well, what did we do? We started putting water in plastic bottles and telling everybody that it's scarce. And that's exactly what we've done with time. And we applied dollar bills to time. And we tell everybody it's scarce because time is money. Time is an energetic currency. So is it really that simple that you could basically take something that is imminently abundant to someone and just fool everybody else into thinking that it's scarce?
There's a lot of, I think, ambiguity in that word scarce and scarcity. A lot of times when I talk to people in these self-development circles, it's all about getting away from scarcity and going towards abundance. But if we look at the concept of scarcity through just a purely economic lens, I don't think we can do anything about economic scarcity. I think it's a pervasive reality that we'll never get beyond. And to define it, what I mean specifically is scarcity occurs anywhere there is more demand for a thing, for a good or for a service, than there is quantity of the thing, such that there are more people that want to use it than there is available of the thing. So we have to resolve that dispute either through contract or through conflict. Contract would be like the auction process. We bid for things. Everyone wants to live on, the big mansion on the private island, but we can't all live there. So how do we resolve that? Well, we bid for the house in the island, and it's worth, hundreds of millions of dollars, for instance. The other way to resolve conflict, or let's say disputes over these resources, scarce resources, is through conflict. So countries go to war, people battle, et cetera, et cetera. Now we can also alleviate economic scarcity by increasing the supply of goods and services. And we do that through trade. Basically, the more we trade, the more intensely we engage in free exchange and free trade, the more we innovate, the more goods and services we create per unit of human hour input. So we get greater outputs per unit of input. And that is economic productivity in a nutshell. So yes, there are all kinds of games being played. The classic example here is diamonds. The De Beers monopoly for many decades diamonds are actually rather abundant,
Mm-hmm.
but they
Yeah.
constrain the supply onto the market, and they push this
Yeah.
huge, what I would
Mm-hmm.
call is like, you could say it's an advertising campaign. I'd say it's more like a psychological operation, that they're like implanting this idea that women need a diamond, diamonds are forever, et cetera, et cetera. And then they slowly release the supply into the marketplace such that they can extract monopoly profits. That's an artificial exacerbation of economic scarcity. But that doesn't mean economic scarcity is something that doesn't exist. Like, it definitely exists. It will always exist
Mm-hmm.
so long as the human heart
Mm-hmm.
has limitless wants, but we live in a world of limited resources. Now, sure, innovation can unlock all kinds of things. If the cheaper we make energy, really, as energy is the primary input to all industrial processes, the cheaper we can make energy, the more economic abundance we can create. And I think that's the best path forward. Now, the trick to that, really, and this is where my antagonism towards the state comes in, is that the state derives all of its revenues from theft. Taxation and inflation are theft. And every hour that human beings spend stealing from other human beings is an hour not spent being productive.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, it's axiomatic in economics that theft reduces productivity. So that entire game we're playing to try and increase outputs per unit of input, we suffer a regression to the extent that we steal from one another. And statism and central banking is institutionalized theft. So if human freedom and flourishing is your metric for success as a civilization, I think we need to outgrow the nation state and the central bank.
So I want to put a pin in that for just a moment because I'd like to go deeper onto that topic. But as far as like this idea of artificial scarcity, how would you, in the mental construct that you just sort of like articulated, where would you put the dollar and central bank in that? Is it an artificial scarcity? Because there is some model of belief, at least from a societal perspective, that dollars are scarce. And maybe for a long time, you could make the argument in the United States, probably up until, Keynesian economics came in, and then this long period of time, and post-World War II era in particular, where we have been engaging heavily in monetary policy. And so what would you call it today in that construct
So
of
you have
what
to
you just
understand the
articulated?
genesis of the US dollar and all fiat currencies. They were originally redemption certificates for gold. So the dollar, I mean, I
Yep.
actually have one right
Mm-hmm.
here. I can show you. So you see this $10 bill. This is an old one. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You can see on there it says redeemable for gold, right?
Yep.
So it was a certificate. It was
Yep.
basically
Yep.
just, it was a technology introduced to make gold more portable and therefore transactable. So gold was a money that emerged on the free market. It emerged on the free market precisely because it's resistant to counterfeiting. It's really hard to produce more gold. It actually has, now another definition of scarcity is like, it's a monetary property. You want a money that's scarce because that's something that means it holds value over time.
Of course. Yeah.
So gold is really
Yeah.
good at
Mm-hmm.
that, but it wasn't really good at expressing value, physical and heavy. And so we introduced gold-backed currency as a solution to that. Now, fast forward to 1971, Nixon revokes redeemability of dollars to gold. It was said to be a temporary measure. That was 51 years ago at this point, 52 years ago at this point. And we've been on this global fiat currency standard ever since. And once you break that peg between the dollar and gold, you've given the state the authority to issue currency ad infinitum there's no check on the monetary system anymore. So to answer your question, yes, US dollars are scarce today in the sense that there is more demand for dollars than there is supply of dollars. But that scarcity is a carryover from gold, right? People were duped into using dollars, a zero reserve fiat currency. They were duped into using that because it was once redeemable for gold. And today, as Ernest Hemingway said about bankruptcy, these things, it's gradually then suddenly. currencies can work for a really long time. And then once you hit this psychological inflection point of people waking up to the reality that the central bank is not going to stop debasing the currency, at which point they start to sell their currency for anything else, right? Anything that can't be printed or counterfeited. It's that psychological inflection point at the collective level that actually triggers hyperinflation. And hyperinflation has been the end state of every fiat currency that has ever existed. This has been an experiment that's been practiced since like 3rd century China. You know, this idea of paper money that a government can control and issue, and they all end the same way. They end printed into absolute worthlessness. So the US dollar is without a doubt on that trajectory. And I think we're living through kind of this global late stage central banking currency crisis. And it is a primary input to all the problems we're seeing in the world, culturally, financially, geopolitically, et cetera.
Yeah. So, you know, I think an important point to mention on that in 71 through 73, when Bretton Woods conference occurred, which is when the gold peg was dropped. But it wasn't only the gold peg that dropped at that time. All currencies in the world were pegged to each other at that time. So they had fixed trading
ratios. They were pegged to the dollar,
within
actually.
Them. They were fixed. They were paid through the dollar, pegged to the dollar, right, which was pegged to gold. And up until that time, and then after Bretton Woods, it was no longer. And you know, as a practical matter, I agree. Prior to that time, you know, gold was a pretty good standard of things to peg, because you know how long it takes to mine stuff, right? And it's not something that's just abundantly everywhere. You have to do a lot of work and expend energy to get it, right? So exactly. So there was a way to ascribe a time relationship to it as well, which is then important to energy. So the point being that, you know, back in the old days, if you kept a bunch of gold in your castle and someone attacked your castle, you know, you can't really have someone steal it very easily, because they can only carry as much as they probably weigh, right? And if they carry more than that, they're not going to get very far before you catch them. So it's kind of a practical matter, but it's not easy in a digital world to transfer this asset around. And then everything was like, you know, like ninth cousins removed from actually their certificate of the ownership of the gold. So it did start to get very, very complex, without a doubt. So I understand why they did it, but really it was more the OPEC oil glut and what happened with the cartels with oil that probably was the straw that broke the camel's back. But since then, we've gone on this unprecedented tour of playing with monetary policy and just printing money like it's going out of style. And we saw the largest of that ever in the last few years, where it was approximately $8 trillion were printed relative to you know, the COVID rescue packages. And that was real money that went out. That wasn't just something on a ledger as a hypothetical. It was real money. The state of California alone lost $31 billion in what they believe is suspected fraud with China, where these were companies like my own companies. All companies were able to get, if they had a certain number of employees, and they could basically apply to PPP. You know, it was a PPP loans that they could get from the banks. They were all government backed. And so literally trillions of dollars went out. And of course, we flooded the market now with tons and tons of dollars. The only way to correct this now is, candidly, you know, to raise interest rates. Well, we've done that. We've now pushed the banks to the edge of their viability. And we've seen that with SVB obviously crashing and going under. We've seen it now also with Credit Suisse going under, right, and getting bought out by UBS in like a midnight deal. And I think we're at this very dangerous place where the Fed, candidly, probably still has to raise interest rates more to find some equilibrium, but they will risk crashing the entire financial system. And I almost start to feel like, okay, the reason why they pull back on raising rates right now is because we're the frog in the boiling water. And they don't want it to be too dramatic of a shift to then wake everyone up to this and, you know, lead the revolution type stuff that you're talking about. But we've already seen it with BlackRock. You know, they bought several houses in my own neighborhood because they knew that inflation was coming. So what's BlackRock? These houses were empty, and they're paying above market prices about a year and a half ago, when the government was printing all this money, they were buying houses across the country in a $10 trillion fund that was actually funded by the US government. So it's almost as if they're wanting to crash the dollar and maybe go towards some sort of other, exchange medium or, CBDC. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
First of all, the word work, this is a very key word to understanding money. If we understand that money is used to acquire products and services, right? This is a definition of money, right? It's a medium of exchange, so it can be used to acquire any product or service the marketplace can generate. All products and services require work, right? Someone has to build it, someone has to provide it, etc. If you can produce a money that requires zero work, which is what a fiat currency is, right? There's a central bank centrally controlling a database that they just add zeros to. They can use that newly printed money, quote unquote printed, just electronically generated, to acquire things, goods and services in the marketplace that require work. So they can produce something for no work to acquire things that require work to produce. It's a fundamental asymmetry. It's theft. It's only possible, you can only preserve a monopoly like that with institutionalized coercion and violence. So as Mao said, political power emanates from the barrel of a gun. You could think of the central bank as a private monopoly or cartel even, where the guns are pointed outward at all of us citizens. We have to use dollars to pay taxes. We have to use the banking system. But we ourselves cannot compete with the dollar, nor can we counterfeit the dollar. The counterfeiting of the US dollar is reserved exclusively for central bank shareholders. So what are we saying here? We're saying that in this quote unquote free market capitalist world that we pride ourselves on here in the West, we have central planning in the largest and most important market of all, which is the market for money itself. So we are nowhere near a free market capitalist society. If money is 1/2 of every transaction, then we are 1/2 socialist, just by virtue of the central bank existing. And so what we need is a free market in the most important market in the world, which is money. People are corralled in digital currency. This is a competitive response to the existence of Bitcoin. This is a topic that was never discussed before the existence of Bitcoin. But now that Bitcoin has emerged and it threatens to disrupt central bank currency counterfeiting cartels, they have no choice but to try and force their existing customer base into a new system that has even greater centralized controls, surveillance, etc. And if you want to see the canary in the coal mine for the catastrophe that this causes, you could look at China, right? The central bank digital currency is an indispensable ingredient to their social credit score system. Where you speak out against the government, your money gets turned off, right? They do public shaming on billboards. If you're hanging out with the wrong people or buying the wrong things or consuming the wrong content, they're literally putting your face on a billboard and shaming you to your local community. People are getting black bagged. They have active gulags all throughout China. I mean, it's a modern day mass atrocity that the whole world just turns a blind eye to. All of that is enabled and facilitated by central bank digital currency. So, I mean, it's a nightmare. It's a total Orwellian nightmare, and I think we have to resist it with every power that we have.
So how to
you have
resist it?
to make yourself expensive to tyrannize. The state's a business ultimately. It's a business that preys on people through coercion, compulsion, and violence. So the more resistant you are to being coerced, compulsed, or having violence initiated against you, the harder of a target you are and the less profitable statism is. So I think you have to be armed. I think you have to have strong communities. I think you need to have food and energy independence to the best of your ability. I think you need to have financial sovereignty, which is, gold, physical gold or Bitcoin in your possession. You can't own certificates to Bitcoin or certificates to gold. That's counterparty risk. It's never going to work. And hopefully, the spreading of ideas like we're doing in these social media forums, that we're exercising free speech ultimately, right? And we're calling out the bullshit in the world. It seems to be abundantly important that people continue to tell the truth as best that they can and do not comply. Like, just fundamentally do not comply with these authoritarian measures. It's not, it may be risky or scary, but think about your children or your family. I mean, the more you comply and roll over and turn a blind eye to these things, the more encroachment we will see and the worse the world will get. So we have to draw a line. We have to stand up for our individual sovereignty and liberty. And we have to live in a way that makes it difficult for the government to tyrannize us.
So how important is free speech? You
Well,
mentioned
look,
it, but can
I
you
mean,
expand on that?
we think and we talk so that our ideas can go to battle and die so that our bodies don't have to, right? Humans are going to have conflicts. We're going to have things to resolve. Again, contract or conflict. We can either speak and resolve and like hash it out, or we can go to physical battle, right? And that's a net negative for everyone. So as far as I'm concerned, you know, when you look at the progression of totalitarianism worldwide, it seems like places like Texas, like Florida, like Tennessee, which is where I live now, these places have been the most resistant to this ideological nonsense. And a lot of that's rooted in a healthy skepticism of government and an awareness of history and people elevating the freedom of speech, the Second Amendment even, right? The right to bear arms. All of these things are very important in maintaining a symmetry of power between individuals and collectives. So it's indispensable, right? We're talking about with speech, it's like the mechanism by which we adapt to one another in the world. If you have fact checkers and censorship and all of this bullshit, it's like you're just preventing people from freely expressing themselves. You're inhibiting humanity's ability to self-organize, and I just don't think there's ever an excuse for that. There's no excuse for censorship. There's no excuse to try and say, even if it's misinformation. You hear this term thrown around a lot. If it's misinformation, well, then provide truthful information to refute it. You don't need to censor it or squash it. It's like if someone's spreading a lie, well, then tell the truth and squash the lie.
Yeah. I mean, there are mechanisms from a societal perspective already for that. You know, if someone tells a lie, they have to be held responsible for that. You know, and that's what a court of law is for. You can either slander or libel somebody if it's in writing, and you still have to be responsible for it. So, I mean, to me, free speech is such a critical aspect. And it's interesting the way you characterize it, talking about kind of one half socialism, but it's almost like one half socialistic totalitarianism. So to me, it's like we are when Hitler ran, right? He was smart the way Hitler got control of Germany. He became chancellor of Germany because he came up with a new concept, which was the airplane. Everyone else was riding cars and going around in trains to go to their different stump speeches around the country. Well, he figured out he could fly and beat everybody from a speed standpoint. This is no different than Trump figuring out how to talk to 80 million people on Twitter, right? And being able to move the public discourse in his directions that he wanted to go to. So Hitler did this, but you know what his party was? His party was a social democratic party. It was sold to the people. The Third Reich as a concept was first sold as a socialist concept that became entirely totalitarian. In fact, I can't think of a single example in the history of political science where a socialist or communist regime wasn't actually amassed for totalitarianism. And this is what I get really concerned about, because whenever these kind of half social regimes come up, what ends up happening is everyone under the auspices of, we have to eradicate the world of hate speech. We have to eradicate the world of people being offended. Well, sometimes you have to actually make the quid pro quo that some people are going to end up being offended by the fact that there is free speech. But that doesn't mean that we can get rid of the free speech. We have to have free speech. Otherwise, how do we have an exchange of ideas in truth and authenticity? We can't. And so it's such a critical aspect, and all the censorship that's happening right now is quite frankly
and it
alarming.
should be alarming. I think it's worth mentioning here too about the rise of Hitler. This is often glossed over, but Hitler arose from the ashes of the Weimar Republic hyperinflation. right? There was a fiat currency hyperinflation that collapsed the German
Yeah,
economy. People were
absolutely.
thrown into total chaos and disarray, desperate for strong leadership. So it created conditions in which a tyrant like Hitler can arise. The demise of fiat currency, the inevitable endgame of fiat currency, directly contributed to the rise of Hitler as a totalitarian force in the world. So like you can't forget that. It's if Germany had been on a sound money standard, there's a very high probability Hitler would have never had that opportunity to rise to power. So that's one thing. And then two, I like to demystify the terms because we hear capitalism, fascism, socialism, communism, all these things thrown around. I really think this is another game that the state plays where they manipulate language and try to make it complex and confusing. The only thing, the exclusive philosophical scope of a government or state is to preserve life, liberty, and property. Anything it does beyond that, it's acting beyond beyond the scope of what a good government should be. This is like, I forget the founding father that said it, but the government that governs best governs least. All you want is that monopoly on force or violence to prevent coercion and violence in the land, right? That's all it's there to do exclusively. Yeah.
I think that may have been
So when we
Jefferson.
talk about all these isms to try and demystify them, communism is the abolition of private property, right? This was Marx's dictum. We don't need to own the things of value that we create because we can have from each according to their ability, to each according to their need, right? Appealing to this like nationalistic faith and devotion, this religiosity, which was kind of very hypocritical, right? Marx was outspoken against religion, yet here he is advocating for this religion of from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Total bullshit. So communism, as we've not only theoretically could ascertain that the abolition of private property leads to the collapse of society, but we've also seen it, right? We've seen it in Soviet Russia, 100 million people dead. It's the opposite of the utopia that was painted. Yes. Now, the opposite
Stalin,
end of the
right?
spectrum
Exactly.
would be true capitalism, which we have never seen in the world ever. We've never seen it. It doesn't exist. We're not in late stage capitalism. We're in late stage central banking. Capitalism is the institutionalized policy of respect for private property in contracts, so that people keep what they earn, will keep what they make, and they're free to trade it with one another. That's what supports wealth creation, the division of labor, et cetera, et cetera. Between these two poles of capitalism and communism, we have socialism, the spectrum of socialism. Socialism is the institutionalized policy of aggression against private property. So the higher your tax rate or the higher the inflation rate, the more socialistic of a society you are. You're moving away from capitalism on that spectrum towards the ultimate abolition of private property, which is communism. And so that's what we're going through today, is we're moving along that spectrum. The more severely these lockdowns are enforced, the more people are taxed, oppressed, coerced. The entire world is sliding away from free market capitalism and moving towards communism. And there's none of that works. Like, I know the words communism sounds like community, or socialism sounds like social. They sound good. I really think people just get hung up on the words themselves, but they are in fact totally unviable, and they lead to catastrophic cases of human suffering, as proven empirically from the 20th century, all the atrocities we saw in the 20th century, but also theoretically. We understand that if you break down private property and I can't keep the fruits of my labor, then not only do I not have an incentive to produce, but someone else also has an incentive to steal from me. So it devolves social cohesion, and there's no pathway to a sustainable civilization that is not purely capitalistic, and that's what Bitcoin really offers us, is an incentive system that it's very expensive to steal within. And by making theft expensive, it makes human interaction more peaceful and prosperous. I do have to jump in 5 minutes. I just wanted to let you know I got a call. Yeah.
Yep. Sure. So I was going to say this, there are lots of people out there that believe that communism in its truest sense has never been tried, because I feel like there's this big belief in this, this notion of communism as an answer And I would say, first of all, please read Ayn Rand books or talk to
That's
somebody
right.
who's from Soviet bloc countries who has experienced it. And they'll tell you a very different story. There is a narrative that is being perpetrated and promulgated right now through universities all over the country that is very much in line with this way of thinking. But I agree entirely with what you said. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Governments derive their just powers
Right.
from the consent of the governed. This is the critical aspect of governance, successful governance. And I would take some, maybe make some disagreement with you. I think that there is more use case for a blockchain other than, as a historical reference. I believe that that the historical reference case allows you with blockchain, because of validation process, to ensure that everybody can't go back and change history. Because one of the first things that happens when you have a culture war is you start destroying history and historical reference. And there's never been a mechanism to be able to stop someone from doing that. I think blockchain actually can perform that, or maybe a derivation of it, can perform that mechanism as well. And I do believe that it will have a role in the future of governance in this world. And it may not be in the exact same form if we think of it right now. But I fundamentally believe in what you just said, which is life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and to maintain your own private property, which is a Fourth Amendment right. And I believe as well that your data is your property. And so therefore, the taking of data, and that's the next thing the government's going to start doing, I believe this, is really trying to commandeer control over all of your data, because that has now become the world's most valuable asset. And that has to be protected, and we have constitutional rights for it. But if everything goes to CBDC, then you're going to see that that's where all the value of the data is going to end up going. And I agree with you. The next step is going to be a social credit system.
100%. I think we are probably in agreement. I would just curate the term blockchain to be Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is the one blockchain. It's actually a time chain, is what Satoshi referred to it as. So in Bitcoin circles, we call it a time chain rather than a blockchain. But to your point of it functioning as an immutable history, an immutable ledger, right? Now, we can't say that about any other blockchain. Even Ethereum, the second largest blockchain in the world, has been rolled back and changed. You could study the 2016 DAO hack, that they literally changed history, right? They roll it back and they fork the chain, and now we have Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. There's only one chain that has never happened to. So probabilistically, I think the Bitcoin time chain is that only instance of unalterable history. And ultimately, in terms of property, it's the one thing you can own independent of the monopoly on violence. It's a bearer asset. Now, you could also argue, again, as I mentioned earlier, physical gold fits this as well. But Bitcoin offers more advantages because it's just digital information, right? You can put your private key on your brain, and you can cross a border with $1 billion on your brain with total plausible deniability about whether or not you have it in your possession. Try doing that with gold, right? $1 billion of gold is a very large room that you need to truck around and have armed guards and et cetera, et cetera. So this idea of giving people really high integrity private property, Bitcoin is something radically new, right? Like knowing and owning are the same thing in Bitcoin. If you know your private keys, you own the Bitcoin. And that's independent of any legal structure or state in the world. So the power that this offers the individual in their negotiations with collectives is unrivaled. And so I think Bitcoin is a really big deal.
I'm definitely a fan. I'm a fan of Bitcoin. I'm just looking forward to the day when they can get all of the miners and everyone to agree to move to a quantum secure standard for encryption. But I think Bitcoin is by far, the best decentralized platform. It's just it needs to go to quantum security. And that is something that I know a lot about, because that's what I spend my time on, in the mathematics of it. But they definitely can do it. It's not.
I think it's a matter of
they need to do it.
The pain point being acute. So if there were a quantum attack on Bitcoin, that's when you would see people moving to a quantum resistant standard. But that's just my view. I do have to jump on a call right now. Sorry I got on here late, but we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, great talking
Oh,
with you,
wonderful.
Robert. I'm going to be in
I'll be there.
Miami
Yeah,
also if you'll be there. So
let's do that.
let's get together.
All right. Thank you.
All right, man.
You too. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one. Bye-bye.